Is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the rule. Let me begin by acknowledging the hard work of our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee who, despite deep divisions and really difficult political conditions, have assembled a bipartisan compromise to fund additional portions of the federal government for the current fiscal year. The bill before us, containing the Financial Services and General Government Act and the National Security, Department of State, and Related Programs Appropriations Act, includes hard-fought Democratic priorities despite our minority position in the House and Senate. These Democratic priorities will help working families and small businesses safeguard our elections and protect American values and interests abroad. Democratic appropriators secured funding for vital government programs that the White House sought to cut, including the CDFI fund, which promotes economic development in low-income communities, the Small Business Administration, which provides invaluable financing that allows people to start or grow their businesses, the Election Assistance Commission, which supports state and federal election integrity across the country, and the package provides a long overdue increase in funding for the Federal Defender Services, which gives access to justice for those who cannot afford it. Importantly, the bill restores funding with meaningful safeguards for humanitarian and democracy-building programs at the Department of State, programs that were illegally shut down earlier this year by the Trump administration. This bill ensures that the U.S. will continue to provide economic and humanitarian assistance and specifically will support women and women's health in developing countries and to combat HIV and AIDS worldwide. These are victories and they matter. They matter for small business owners struggling to secure a loan. They matter for low-income neighborhoods that are essentially redlined by big banks and rely upon community development financial institutions. These victories matter for women and girls around the globe seeking safety, education, and health care. And the restoration of State Department funding matters for all of us who still believe in the promise of American leadership in advancing a safe and prosperous global community. Ultimately, we cannot afford to let funding lapse for those agencies, and given that we're 4 months into the current fiscal year, I commend our appropriators for crafting these bipartisan bills to address FY 2026 so that we can immediately start working on appropriations for next year and FY 2027. But, Mr. Speaker, commendable as this package is, and as much as I respect the work of our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, I also believe this package reveals the limits of what we can achieve to meet the needs of the American people under Republican control. Let's be clear, this bill isn't some compromise where both sides get a little of what they want. It's the most Democrats could get from a Republican Party that continues to knuckle under to the whims of the Trump administration and turn a blind eye to its worst abuses. That is why our Republican colleagues have rejected multiple provisions to rein in the unconstitutional power grabs by this president and his administration. Republicans control the Senate, the House, and the White House. Under unified Republican control, we've seen the federal government used not to help the American people, but to punish the president's enemies and to enrich and protect the rich and well-connected at the expense of the American people. We've seen it when the Republican trifecta passed a partisan bill that gave huge tax cuts to big business and billionaires, but refused to extend the ACA tax credits that help millions of Americans afford their health coverage. In their main legislative accomplishment so far, Trump and congressional Republicans blew a massive hole in the deficit with their tax cuts for the rich, and then tried to pay for it with cuts to Medicaid, SNAP, and public health programs that Americans rely upon. We're seeing it play out after a masked federal agent shot and killed Renee Good, an American citizen in Minnesota. In the wake of that killing, we learned that DOJ leadership blocked the decades-long practice of initiating an investigation of an officer-involved shooting by the Office of Civil Rights. And having blocked that investigation, instead opened a politically motivated criminal investigation of Ms. Good's widow as it tries to brand protected speech by Americans as domestic terrorism. The failure to investigate the lawfulness of the officer's use of force and the weaponization of the investigation to attack the widow are so beyond the pale that it has sparked a mass resignation by career prosecutors at the Department of Justice. And it goes on. Last weekend, the Trump White House launched a criminal investigation against Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, not because he broke the law, but apparently because he refused to surrender the independence of the Fed and submit to the president's demand that he lower interest rates. This is an unprecedented attack on the independence of the Federal Reserve, an institution that is critical to the stability of our economy because it's above partisan politics. And yet, under Republican rule, the independence of the Fed and other nonpartisan agencies is being destroyed before our eyes because this president cannot tolerate dissent, and his party will not restrain him. Just last week, the administration blocked $10 billion in social services funding to states with Democratic leadership. Yesterday, President Trump went even further, announcing his intent to withhold federal funds from any state that does not embrace his toxic immigration priorities. This is extortion, plain and simple, directed against the American people he was elected to serve. And the House Republican majority is letting him get away with it. Of course, we cannot forget the continued cover-up of the Epstein files. The Department of Justice was mandated by law to release the Epstein files last year now. But the vast majority of the files are still being kept secret, leading us to ask again, who is Trump trying to protect? And why is it that Republicans refuse to hold him responsible for this blatant cover-up? What possible justification could there be for this secrecy except to protect the wealthy and powerful men implicated in those documents? A suggestion of the answers has come from an unlikely source, according to former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. The president yelled at her in a phone call that he didn't want to release the Epstein files because, quote, "my friends will get hurt," end quote. The list goes on, and the Republican agenda is clear. They abuse the powers of the federal government to protect the elite and punish the vulnerable. So while I will support the appropriations minibus this week, I call on my Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate to take seriously their obligations to this institution under Article 1 of the Constitution. We cannot sit by and watch as the executive branch grabs more and more power at the expense of Congress and at the expense of the Constitution. Congress's power of the purse is not just a budgetary tool. It is one of the last real checks we have on a president who believes that he's above the law and only constrained by his own morality. I know my Democratic colleagues fought for everything they could in this bill under deeply constrained circumstances, so the failures in this bill are a reflection of the Republican majority, which continues to look the other way as the president dismantles our federal institutions and subverts our democracy. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.